Hello, I'm Douglas Bell, and I want to welcome you to another episode of Ringing the Bell, where we are interviewing artists who are living at the intersection of art, social justice, and the human spirit. Today, my guest is the author of Medicine for the Blues trilogy. It is a trilogy exploring the lives of two gay men during the 1920s. I found these characters extremely engaging, but what I found most impressive and most engaging is learning about the deep research that was done about Oregon's gay history to write this story. And it is the revelation of what was driving the cultural narrative at that time, driving both racial and sexual discrimination going on in the early 20th century. So today I want to welcome my guest, Jeff Stookey. Hey, Jeff.
Hello.
How you doing?
I'm good. I'm glad to be here.
Good. So now you are in Portland?
That's right, Portland, Oregon.
So what's the weather like there?
Well, it's been dry, but we just got some rain today, so that's a real welcome. We don't have to water the garden today.
Now, see, I've never been to Portland. But it's a rainy place though, right? I mean, that's what it does. It rains there.
Well, from October on, usually, yes, but in the summer it can be really hot and dry. We had a really hot July this year, and there are a number of wildfires that have been going on around the state too.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. I didn't
Yeah.
realize. Okay, you only hear about California wildfires. I didn't realize there were other wildfires going on in the country.
Oh yeah, and in Washington too.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that. Wow. Okay. So, I want to talk to you about your novels. Medicine for the Blues trilogy. I enjoyed this. This was a good read. This was an interesting read. So when did you start writing?
I wrote some stories when I was in elementary school and
Oh, really?
junior high and high school.
Okay.
But when I was in junior high, we took a career exploration unit. And the two things that I really liked doing when I was younger was writing stories and drawing pictures.
Okay.
And when I was doing this career research, I learned that a good place to combine those two interests was in theater and in movies and filmmaking. And so I became really obsessed with filmmaking when I was a teenager. And I focused on that until I was in my 40s.
Okay.
But when I was in college and afterwards, since I was focusing on filmmaking, I wasn't doing any writing really. But after in 1986, I finished a group of short films called Western Movements, which is available on my website under the blog tab. What happened was I had read The Color Purple by Alice Walker, which I
Really?
really loved the book.
Uh-huh.
And I saw the movie by Steven Spielberg, and I was really disappointed in the movie.
Oh.
And at that point, I decided to turn to writing. I'd kind of decided that I was through with filmmaking at that point because it's a very cumbersome process, as you can imagine.
So, but I hate to break in the story here. So you're saying you were that disappointed with the movie version of Color Purple that you kind of abandoned, or you kind of like, well, I'm over this. I'm done. Yeah, I don't want to do movie. Was it Color Purple specifically, or was it something that Steven Spielberg did that really like turned you off?
It was Spielberg's movie. I felt that he left out some of the most important things that were in the book. The lesbian relationship is very much watered down in the movie.
Hmm.
Um, One of the things I loved about the book was there's a whole thing about quilts and quilting in there that it doesn't appear in the movie at all. And I thought it would be a great visual thing for him to include, but that didn't happen. Um, so I decided to start writing. I've been interested in creative stuff, my whole life.
Hmm.
And since I wasn't going to be making movies anymore, I decided to try my hand at writing. So around 1998, I turned 50 and I decided, well, I've got enough experience in my background and I've survived this long. Maybe I have something to say.
Right.
So I sat down to write, and I was going to write about a writer friend of mine who I knew in Seattle, named Jesse Bernstein. And when I sat down to really get into writing, this image fell into my lap just out of nowhere. It was an image of two men necking in a 1920s automobile in a rural setting.
Okay.
And so I became really fascinated with this image, and I just kept exploring it and asking myself questions. Who are these guys?
Hmm.
What was their background? How did they meet? Uh, what were their dreams? Where were they headed? What was going to happen to them? And
Hmm.
um, since I knew it was the 1920s, I started researching that period. And the more I learned, the more stuff fell into place in the story.
Hmm.
For example, when I learned about the the resurgence of the Ku Klux Klan in the 1920s,
Hmm.
I knew that had to be part of the story.
Hmm.
And then I learned about the eugenics movement, which
Hmm.
was passing human sterilization laws aimed at marginalized groups like gays, which they called social deviants, and uh, let's see, uh, weak-minded people, people who were uh, uh, mentally challenged,
Right.
even criminality. They thought criminality was inherited. And
Hmm.
so they passed these laws, and I knew that had to be part of the story also. So the story just unfolded from there.
Yeah, I think when I think about the eugenics portion of this, you forget that that was part of the culture back then, or that is what was driving uh, who was right, who was wrong, who was better, who was bad, who didn't deserve this, who didn't deserve that. I mean, we don't, we wouldn't use those terms eugenics today, but it was really interesting that you are aware of that and you brought that up and made that part of the story. And it's kind of like, oh wow! But I was glad to see that you did that. I thought it was a very authentic approach to what was going on at that time. Um, but I have a question though about the eugenics specifically. Eugenics, do you know if it pervaded through the entire country, or was this more of kind of like a Oregon, I don't know, Midwest type thing, or was this also in New York City? Was this the thought everywhere?
I've read that some of the presidents and high-ranking government elected officials were in favor of eugenics back then.
Oh,
Um, it was pseudoscience back then, but people believed that was all true, that those
mhm,
traits were inheritable, which of course we know now that's not true.
right.
Um, Another thing that I found really interesting later on is that the the Nazis adopted their a lot of their philosophy based on the American eugenics movement
Really?
and the Jim Crow, the whole Jim Crow business in the American South.
Correct, correct, correct. Yeah, no.
So
Oh, what
we
did you
kind
say?
of inspired them.
Right, right. Yeah, no, I thought that was a wonderful addition to the story. So let's just kind of tell me the kind of the trajectory of the entire trilogy. I know you've got the two characters where one he's come back from, is it World War I in the
Yes.
beginning? Come back from World War I, and he was a doctor in World War I, and so he is trying to, I guess, make a career for himself while he's back. And so he's kind of dealing with all these elite community, I guess you can say, in which to start his medical career. So kind of take me from there, then take me to the end of the trilogy.
Well, just briefly, Carl Holman, who's a young doctor, comes back from World War I, where he's had a number of traumatic experiences, part of which is he discovers that he's gay and begins having gay relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And when he comes back to Portland, he meets Jimmy Harper, who was an ambitious young jazz piano player.
Mm-hmm.
And he's really attracted to Jimmy, and he kind of angles to get to know him better. And they develop a relationship that deepens through
Right.
the first part of the book. Now, Jimmy has ambitions to go to Chicago and win fame and fortune in the jazz
Mm-hmm.
scene in Chicago, because that was a really um, hot place for jazz at the
Right.
time. A lot of jazz musicians had moved north from New Orleans after World War One.
Okay.
Uh, uh, Satchmo is a good example of that. Um, and he, Jimmy, goes to Chicago with his band, and he ends up getting involved with a sinister mob boss and also with a African American drag queen, drag performer.
Now this is in the set. Now we move into the second book.
Yes, this is
Yes.
Chicago
Yes,
Blues.
yes, yes. Okay.
Yeah, the first book is called Acquaintance, and it's basically the relationship between Jimmy and Carl. And then Chicago Blues takes place in Chicago with Jimmy and his band and all
Right.
of the things that happen to him there, which end up being quite dramatic or quite traumatic. So after his time in Chicago, um, we moved back to Oregon, where Dr. Holman is developing his career, but he's having a lot of tensions with the older doctors that he's working with
Mm-hmm.
because he's learned a lot of things, new techniques and new medical ideas working in World War One.
Okay.
And that really ruffles the feathers of a lot of these older doctors that he's working with.
Mm-hmm.
So he's having a lot of career problems at that time. And Jimmy returns to Portland, and there start to be rumblings that Carl and Jimmy are having an affair,
Mm-hmm.
and that affects his career. And so, what they try to do in the third book, which is Dangerous Medicine, is try to figure out a way that they can live an authentic life
Right.
together in spite of this hostile environment where
Right.
that they're in the midst of.
Mm-hmm. So what is your larger for you when you were writing this story and taking your characters through their trials and tribulations? What's the biggest message you wanted to send to the reader?
Well, very much like your books, I wanted people to feel empathy for these characters
Okay.
and understand what they were going through.
Hmm.
I was really interested in getting some of this history out there because not a lot of people know about how influential the Klan was in the 1920s.
Hmm.
Now, when I was writing this, um, I learned about an incident where an Ethiopian student was murdered on the streets of Portland late at night by a trio of white supremacist skinheads.
Hmm.
And I saw a direct line between the 1920s Klan and that group in the 80s, the white supremacist skinheads.
Hmm.
And as was finishing up the novel, um, Donald Trump was running on a racist platform for president of the United States in 2016. And I
Right.
saw a through line through that whole movement.
Hmm.
So I wanted people to be more aware of that history.
Right, right, right. Yeah, I think for me, I think, and I'll say this, I don't know, and it's maybe wrong. I think most Black people are aware of the Klan's uh, resurgence in the early 1900s. But what I don't think most people are aware of, and particularly Black people, I think, is that Portland was like a hub. If I'm understanding this right, for the Klan. And I was really blown away when I saw that history and also realizing that it was in its original state constitution, it was started as a whites only state. Okay,
Yes.
that I was like, oh, you got to be kidding me. You talk about white flight. They made a whole state just for everybody to go to. Yeah. So that is what I don't think most people are aware of, is that is part of Oregon's, also Oregon's racial history. Um, you think places up in Portland and Wyoming, they're kind of quiet, nothing happens there, but it's a lot going on in those states.
Yeah, for sure. That was in the Oregon Constitution that blacks could not settle in Oregon.
Hmm.
And they had, I think they call them sundown laws that black people couldn't spend the night in
Correct.
any Oregon towns.
Okay, I didn't know Oregon had that. I know you have that in the South, but I didn't know places like Oregon had it there, but I know you have that in the South. So, how long did it take you to write the trilogy?
I worked on it for 20 years.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
Oh, I didn't know that.
I worked on it off and on, writing and rewriting, which I know you're well familiar with the process of rewriting draft after draft. Um, I After I finished the first draft, I took a class, a novel writing class at a place called the Attic Institute here in
Mhm.
Portland.
Okay.
Uh, and that was really helpful. And out of that class, we formed a critique group of 4 people, and we met for over a year, going through our various novels. And that was a really good experience. And then later on, after I decided to publish,
Hmm.
and my editor was going through the book with me, I also hooked up with another writing group and critique group, and that also really helped refine the story.
Hmm. So, now and I didn't look, did you self-publish, or were you picked up by a publisher?
Yes, I self-published.
Self-published. Okay. Okay. And it's interesting about the whole, you have, which I didn't realize, you have writing and then you have publishing, and that is two two totally different things. Um, if you had, and I'm kind of making this up here on the fly here, but if you had, I don't know, a feeling or a sentiment or just a quick 3 words of how you feel about publishing a novel, what comes to mind? Because the thing that comes to mind is one of the hardest things I think I've ever done. So what about you?
Yes, it's a lot of work. There are a lot of steps you have to go through.
Correct.
Part of the reason I self-published is uh, after I decided to publish during the Trump candidacy in 2016.
Uh-huh.
I pitched the novels to a number of agents, and I didn't get any response. And I realized that it would take me a number of years just to find
Mm,
a an agent and then to find a publisher. And I
correct.
really wanted to get the story and
Correct.
this history out into the public.
Yes.
So that's when I decided to self-publish. And my editor had done a lot of self-publishing of her own books. And so she guided me through the whole process, which was
Mm-hmm.
really helpful. But
Mm,
yeah, there are a lot of steps involved. She put me in touch with a book designer. She
mm,
put me in touch with some people who were able to do the technical stuff that's involved with getting ebooks out there.
uh-huh.
And then later on, organization in Portland called Indigo Editing helped me uh, do an audio book, and I got an old friend of mine who is an actor
Uh-huh.
to narrate the audiobook as well. So there were just so many steps, all along the way.
No, you're totally right. And I didn't, I know for myself now, I don't know what your thoughts are about this, but for myself now, I am trying to give myself 8 months before the book launch. So 8 months of promotion before I launch my novels. And that was one of the mistakes that I know I made when I wrote the first book. I did not give myself enough time to get reviews, to get in front of enough people, to talk and dialogue and see actually what I had on my hands in terms of the promotion. Are you kind of feeling the same way um, about the promotion effort?
Yes, I didn't know anything about advanced reader copies when I was publishing. Uh, I just went ahead and put it out there. I didn't know anything about pre-publishing uh, promotion and all of that, getting reviews beforehand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm going to switch here to talking about the spiritual side of all of this. When me and you first met, we didn't realize that we had this connection of meditation. And I know for me, my meditation has really supported my writing. My meditation has actually given me the courage to be as authentic as I possibly can be in my writing. My meditation has given me the insight that I can be courageous and write what is in my heart. Kind of like I came across a quote that said, "Write as if no one was going to read this."
Hmm.
And my question for you, with that being said, how has your spiritual practice, how has meditation informed your work?
Well, that's kind of a difficult question. I remember having sons and with one of the teachers at Dharma Rain Zen Center here in Portland,
Mm-hmm.
which I've been connected with. And I asked, what do you do if you're meditating and the ideas and the book and the writing just keeps invading your mind,
Uh-huh.
which is not what you're supposed to be thinking about when you're meditating. And she was a writer, and she suggested, well, if it's that pressing, stop meditating and go write.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But
Well, that, I would have thought she would have said, I thought she would have asked you just to recognize it and then become present again. But she makes a good point. If it's that pressing, maybe you should go right, so you don't miss anything.
well, I do sometimes when I'm meditating, if I get an idea or something that I need to do,
Uh-huh.
um, I'll write it down on a post-it next to where I'm meditating.
Hmm.
But generally, what I adopted as a practice was I imagined that that idea or whatever it was that had to do with the writing or some creative thing that kept coming up in my mind, I imagined it as a goldfish, and
Okay.
I took the goldfish and dumped it into a deep well so
Okay.
it could swim down into my subconscious and gather whatever it needed to come to fruition. And I tell myself, this isn't the time to think about it. Continue your meditation, and
Right.
it'll come back to you later
Hmm.
when you need it.
Right. 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 That's interesting. I don't think I have that. I don't think that's an interesting take. I haven't tried that yet. I've been more kind of like, okay, I'm acknowledging that I'm thinking about this. And then I start trying to count my breaths again until 2 seconds later, I'm thinking about it again. And then I start trying to count my breaths again. So I don't know. Maybe there's a million ways to try to remain present in all of this. But that's an interesting take on this. Um, Question: do you believe art can heal? Do you believe writing can heal? Do you believe art can heal?
Absolutely, absolutely. Certainly, this flood of LGBTQ plus literature that we've seen over the past, 30, 40 years,
Mhm.
has really, I think, been really beneficial to people who are gay and um, were having trouble coming out or
Mhm.
didn't know what to make of their situation.
Mhm.
Uh, I think that's been really healing. Um, yeah. What I wonder though is people who have prejudices don't necessarily expose themselves to other ideas, to the
Right.
kind of writing that you and I have been doing,
Right.
and it. But I think that it's important to have those things out there in the public. I
Mhm.
keep remembering uh, the Oscar Wilde phrase, "the love that dare not speak its name."
Okay.
Well, that indicates that if you put those ideas out there and you become more visible, it's easier for people who are like you and for the
Mhm.
public to accept.
Mhm. And I totally agree with that. And something's come to mind when I was listening to you. And I identify as straight. But as you know, I try my best to be the best ally to the LGBTQ plus community as I possibly can, but not living as a gay person or identifying as LGBTQ plus. Is it different? And I'm trying to make the point why the literature is so important, why the art is so important, that for maybe a person living in a rural town versus a person maybe living in an urban center, could you possibly be less ability to know someone else is like you in a rural place versus living in a big city? Because I read something once about the armed services that a lot of people I don't know how I'm trying to say this, but I guess I'm just trying to make people went from the rural places to the city with the intention that hopefully you would find someone who was like you. is that possibly part of this healing that you're talking about, or why art can heal? Because if you can't move, maybe you can find that connection through the art.
Sure, exactly. An interesting side note here. My partner, Ken, grew up in Texas,
Uh-huh.
and all the time he was growing up, he knew that he was gay, and he didn't think, well, there's something wrong with me. What he decided was, these people that I'm living with, they're all crazy. It's something that's wrong with them, not something that's wrong with me. But I think you're right that a lot of young people growing up in rural
Mm-hmm.
communities don't have that kind of faith in themselves and don't have connections with other gay people. And probably, I know a lot of people have written and said that they didn't know, they thought they were the only person like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but now with like you say, all of this literature flooding the market and the internet, I think the internet is really important because it makes so much available to young people these days who are questioning. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really helpful.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, that we need these stories out here. We need the ability to see these stories and have these stories. I do like your partner's take on this, that there's something wrong with the rest of the world. There's nothing wrong with me. I'm fine. It's refreshing to hear that level of acceptance. Um, but I guess it can be really difficult from a safety standpoint, both physical safety as well as emotional and mental safety, as to why, this is so difficult to be open and outwardly authentic. So you're right, having access to these stories, um, I could see being very um, nice to have, I guess is all I'm really trying to say. Um, you've been reading and writing stories and everything. Are there different types of LGBTQ plus stories you would like to see in the world? Like for myself, last night I had a book event and someone made the statement that they had never heard of anyone writing about a relationship with a trans person from a gender perspective. So they were saying that it was really nice to see finally, you know, a this story written from another perspective. So are there some stories out there that you would like to see more of?
Yes, I saw a remark on Instagram recently uh, saying that they had read a book about a gay couple who were parenting,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's something that's important um, culturally
Mm-hmm.
to get out there. I think Pete Buttigieg and his husband raising two young children, and then the British diver Tom Daley, he and his husband are raising a couple of young boys.
Okay.
And I think having that information and those role models out there really helps normalize that, uh, just generally speaking.
Mm-hmm. So you would like to see, to your point, as the culture kind of moves to where it's becoming, hopefully, well, it's becoming more inclusive of trans people, but it's also becoming more inclusive of uh, gay couples who are parenting. And you're saying you feel like there needs to be more fiction around those situations, raising of kids, all the things that you go through, both the bad and the good, the hard and the easy. You feel like that's kind of the next next wave or next look of books that you would like to see that have kind of that coming out of this particular community or genre. And I can see.
Right. Yeah, and I think your books are a good example because you've got this trans woman who is acting in a parenting uh, role with the young kid Lance,
Yes,
especially, which is important for both, well, for both of them, really,
right.
for the whole family.
Yeah, for the whole, including Brian, the cis straight guy in all of this. He he needed Nadia. He needed Nadia's strength in order to be the parent that Lance needed him to be. He could not do this by himself. And to your point, I was really trying to uh, show the value of motherhood, the value of the feminine, regardless of what body it comes in or how it comes, but the value of the feminine and what it brings to the foundation that it brings to a family or to a unit. I appreciate you acknowledging um, Nadia's parenting in this in this story because it was crucial, it was important to that family unit moving forward. That's true. Yeah, I never really thought about it as much as you've given it credit. It almost kind of seemed to be maybe a side note, but maybe it really needs to be a bigger portion of the story than what I thought it may have been. So tell me, so where are you headed next? What do you want to work on next? Because I know you do a lot of book reviews. Do you have any books right now that you really want to point out that for you have been that you've really liked? Do you have a few in your mind?
Oh boy, a
Okay.
lot. Um, a lot of the books that I read when I was researching for the novels were really terrific. Um, in particular, some of the books about jazz in the 1920s,
Uh-huh.
jazz musicians. I read a number of biographies, uh, and one of them is called Remembering Bix, about the cornet player Bix Beiderbecke. It's
Okay.
written by Ralph Burton, and he taught it's a memoir of the 1920s, the jazz age, and it's written from the perspective of a 13-year-old, a precocious 13-year-old kid who has befriended Bix and really looks up to him.
Okay.
And it's just a terrific book. I
Okay.
really love that one. There's another one called Really the Blues by a jazz player called Mez Mesro.
Uh-huh.
And he had a quite a good relationship with Louis Armstrong and he and a lot of other jazz musicians of
Mhm.
the time. And what's extraordinary about that book is his use of slang at the time. I've heard that that book was a big influence on uh, Jack Kerouac and the Beat Generation.
Oh.
But those are two real standouts. Um, lately, I've been reading a lot of World War One books
Okay.
because my main character, Carl Holman, is a World War One vet.
Right.
Uh, there's a really good book called These Old Lies by Larry Barton,
Okay.
a British writer, and it's a gay story set in World War One, and then it goes forward into um, the later parts of the century. I really enjoyed that book. I read recently a number of books by Balzac, the French writer,
Uh-huh.
and uh, he he has a character called Vautrin, who Marcel Proust read as a homosexual man, even though there aren't any uh, uh, overt homosexual acts in the book, but
Mhm.
he obviously is real taken by attractive young men. Uh, and I really liked Balzac's writing. He illuminates so many aspects of French culture in the early 1800s,
Okay.
uh, both industry, especially the publishing and printing industry,
Mhm.
journalism, banking and finance, the politics, the fashions, the society. It's a really fascinating um, milieu that he really describes really well. He's written some 90 novels, but a good place to start would be his novel Pere Goriot, um, and Lost Illusions. Those are two I especially liked.
Huh. Okay. Have had no idea these books exist. I will have to go look them up. They sound interesting. You sound
Yeah,
interesting.
you can find a lot of my reviews on my social media um, accounts, and also I have a Goodreads account.
Okay.
You can see some of my reviews.
So what is your Instagram handle?
Instagram is Jeff Stookey 1923, and Facebook is just Jeff Stookey. And I have another page called Medicine for the Blues.
Mm-hmm. And your website?
The website is the same. You can
Okay.
look it up, www.jeffstookey.com or medicinefortheblues.com.
Okay. Okay. Well, I want to tell you, this was a thank you for coming to for talking with me today. This has been an interesting interview. Um, this is exactly what I feel like we as artists and writers should be doing, connecting, talking about why we're writing, why these things matter, this desire for us to get this stuff within us, to get it outside of us and connect with people. That's what I hear you saying. And that's one reason why I wanted to talk to you, is because when we met, that's what I got from you, this desire to connect with people, but also to inform them. And I thought once again, I think you did a great job of informing people about the environment in the early 20th century in the novel that you've written. So I do want to say thank you for that. So
Well,
thank
thank
you.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you for inviting me to talk. I've enjoyed this.
No, this has been good. So yes, if you enjoyed our interview today, please hit the subscribe button. We'd love to hear from you as well. Turn on your notifications. I am Douglas Bell, and you can find me on my social media handles at Douglas Bell Author with Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. So take care of yourself and have a good day.